We are now joined. I'm anxious to have this conversation because this has been a long-standing kind of relationship for me with this organization, and I've known this individual now for a while. And you guys are in the middle of a very important process in terms of the annual cycle of this organization. So this is good timing, not coincidental.
Yes, thank you for
welcome.
timing this so well.
So I have with me Melissa Vincent. She's the executive director for Pipeline Entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to start this off the way I started off the last one. I don't think you were here when we started, but
It's the first few minutes.
how'd you tell us a little bit about who Melissa is, a little bit about your background and a little bit how you ended up here, and then we'll get to the pipeline piece of this.
So I realized this week that not everyone knows that I was actually an entrepreneur myself.
Very helpful probably in this conversation.
So I have been in either a partner, had my own startups, or been involved with Pipeline for about 17 years. So long history of running startups, being involved in startups, and then almost 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy, taking over Pipeline. So for me, when I first started at Pipeline, right before the pandemic started in January of 2020, I felt like the same feeling that I think a lot of our fellows feel when they first are introduced to Pipeline, which is that this is their family. It's like all of a sudden you meet these people who think like you, who have this desire to build something of importance and a change maker and not work for a corporate company, to be a serial entrepreneur. And so I resonated with that when I started at Pipeline in the same way that our fellows and our members do. And we are just coming off a module where everyone got to be together. And the power of that connection and community is massive. Feeling like you have other people who are just as engaged in building something that can, whether it is something that creates change, whether it's something that, is scalable, you have this common bond. And so for me, when I started at Pipeline, that was the thing that really drew me to the organization because my background was in being an entrepreneur myself.
So tell me a little bit about that. What was your company that you had previously?
So I was originally part of a background screening company. So that was the first company I was a part of. And then it was successfully sold. And so the angel investor behind that company was like, hey, wanted to bring the same team together, which good choice. So we started a second company that back in 2008 was the first mobile giving donation platform. So what I realized through that process was that I really love seeing something from idea through build out. And then after that, I saw that there was a need for software development for non-tech founders, because as a non-tech founder, we had, development teams in every country you could imagine. And as a non-tech founder, if you don't read code, you have no way of knowing whether or not the code's accurate, all these different things. And so that was actually how I started my own company, was just I saw this need. And then after that, I started a sports tech company to try to create an even playing field for kids who don't have access to elite training. And then after that, I was recruited for Pipeline, and I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Serial entrepreneur. I think that's an extremely important aspect of why you're in the seat you're in now, since that's kind of what you guys are all about. Tell me a little bit about Pipeline. So tell me, and let's start with just the basics. What is Pipeline?
So Pipeline is a fellowship for high growth entrepreneurs in the Midwest. So our region is Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri. So our fellows, there are 2 here, go through a year-long program, and what we're trying to do is help them. They're already growing and scaling when they get to us. Our job is to help them scale faster and get to a place where they're driving revenue, creating jobs. It's basically an economic development play for the region, because we are helping the people who are the backbone of the economy, essentially. We're helping them grow their companies faster, stronger, better. So they go through a year-long fellowship program, and then after that, they become members. So the organization's been around since 2007, and we have close to 200 members, which is a pretty powerful piece of the economy in Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri.
And so this year-long fellowship, what's the structure? So I have a lot of people who ask me, is it mentorship? Is it an accelerator? What's it mean to become a fellow? Tell me about the structure, that year-long fellowship. What's involved in that?
Well, we just came back from Lincoln, literally on Saturday night. So there are 4 modules a year that are 3 days long. They're intensive, digging in, learning about your company, figuring out how to better scale your company with some of the best leaders in the country. And we bring them in and they spend 3 days really kind of breaking down each of our fellows' companies. So that way, by the 3rd day, they have kind of revamped and tweaked and adjusted some of the things that maybe weren't, that could be better. And so for our module that we just finished, we were talking about financials, which when you hear it, you're like, okay, everyone should know about their financials if they're scaling and growing their companies. But this is different. It is telling your story through your financials. And I think that everyone probably went into that, as they always do, thinking, I know my financials. But on the first day, you're like, oh, but I can't tell my story through my financials. And that by the end, on the 3rd day, they're able to do that. So we take them through 4 different modules. The thing that's very different about Pipeline than other what you would think of as accelerators is that we do not take equity in the entrepreneurs in their companies. We are rider, not the horse, which means we are completely focused on serial entrepreneurs because we want someone who, if their company fails, and statistically it very well might, they're going to get right back up and start another company. If they're successful, they are going to get right back up and start another company. And that is why serial entrepreneurs in particular have such a significant impact on the economy, because they're constantly creating jobs. No matter how successful they are, whether they have exits, whether they fail, they get back up. And that's this unique subset of entrepreneurs that Pipeline has always catered to. And the statistics are pretty powerful that that's been a really good bet to bet on serial entrepreneurs.
How many fellows do you take into the fellowship?
So that's the hard part.
Okay.
So we only take 10 to 13 a year. Since I've been there for 3 years, it's been 13 each year. It's very hard to get into. And so what happens a lot of times is that people will apply, they don't get in, and they're like, well, I hate Pipeline. I mean, they don't, some of them may, but it's hard to get into. People apply 4 or 5 times before they get in. And it's not because their company isn't an amazing company or that we don't believe in their idea. They just need to be a little further along. And so we try to, in the interview process, which you're a part of, try to give them good feedback and insight so that way they can make those improvements, come back, apply again, and get in. And so it is a bit of a arduous process. There's multiple rounds of interviews and applications, but our goal is to really find those serial entrepreneurs who, again, are going to scale, exit, reinvest in the community, start another company, or if they fail, they're going to get right back up. And not everyone that has a successful company is a serial entrepreneur. We want the serial entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think for me, when I first found out about Pipeline, first got exposed to the program through my friend Davion Ross, who will be here next week, by the way. So come back and see Davion Ross in Founder Stories.
Because he's awesome.
The thing that attracted me to the program was it wasn't about the company. It was about the founder, and it was investment in the founder. And that's not what you usually see. Typically, when you see these programs, whether they're equity-based or not, whether it's, Plug and Play doesn't take equity, but they still focus on the company. They want to see the company be successful. And I've even seen at the end of those programs, people in those programs talking about whether or not that's the right CEO to lead that company to its next stage. To me, that's not where you want to be if you're running a program. Right. You want to invest in the person who's sitting in front of you. And I think that's what attracted me to Pipeline as a mentor at first, and then as an advisor, was this focus on serial entrepreneurship. And so that's part of what you are looking for when you vet people, right? Is that
huge part of it.
Propensity and that desire to, if this doesn't work, what are you going to do? And you're not looking for, I'm going to go back and work for a company, or what you're looking for.
Yeah, and equally, the big question that people get, and I think they normally fail, it's like, oh, this company that you're in, if it succeeds and you exit, what are you going to do? And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to, go, have an island and, take 3 months off. And
sounds good though.
Right? I mean, it does, but it does lose you a few points in the Pipeline scale, because we want, not that you can't take a few months off, but it is that serial entrepreneur that when you're successful, you just have that drive that's like, ooh, but I had this idea and I want to do, serial entrepreneurs always have like 5 different ideas going. That's the thing. And so you want serial entrepreneurs who are going to keep coming back and, again, investing in themselves, investing in the community. And I don't think that I could be involved with Pipeline if it wasn't about the founder, if it was about their company. I mean, that would be such a difficult place to be, and I understand why other programs do that. I'm so thankful to be a part of Pipeline where we are focused on the founder, because truly that's who you're investing in. And I think that's why, just to give a little history on Pipeline, when it very first started, it wasn't supposed to be a membership-based organization. It was supposed to just be, you go through the year-long fellowship and you're done. But what happened was the people who went through the program were very much like, well, I love these people. I need to keep spending time with these people. And as a result of that, it turned into a membership-based program that you go through the fellowship year and then you become a member. And one, I think that's because it's very hard to be a serial entrepreneur. So we've created this community since 2007. But the other piece is that, you know, there's very few programs that do that. Typically, like, let's just say Techstars. You go through Techstars, but you don't become a member afterwards. You're going through the program to get the education. You're not going through the program to get the education and become part of a community. And that's the difference with Pipeline, is we've really built a community, and that's what we're continuing to try to do and evolve.
So the modules, you made a comment, you kind of brushed right past it, but I want to go back to it, which is like the caliber of people who lead these modules. Because having been through some programs where you've got somebody that leads a financials module or customer development module, it's a university professor, it's somebody like along those lines, but who are the types of individuals? Give us some examples of folks that, and a lot of these people have been involved in the program longer than I have been. So
I will give you the one from module 3, because one, she was one of the original people that put together kind of the idea of what Pipeline could be. And when you think about 2007, there weren't, you know, Techstars wasn't here, you know, there weren't any other, we're the only show in town. I mean, there really wasn't anyone else. And so the idea that if you took these resources from the coast and you brought them here to the Midwest, could you have a positive impact on the entrepreneurs that you were serving? And obviously the answer has been a resounding yes, but I think a huge part of that is the quality of the people who are leading the module. So we just finished, as I mentioned, our financials module, and our main lead presenter for that module is a woman by the name of Laura Kilcrease. If you Google her, she is credited with starting the tech scene in Austin. She now runs the entire province of Alberta's innovation arm, the entire province. And she was recruited there because of what she did in Austin. She's constantly being recruited to go elsewhere. She is one of the most brilliant minds around financials, how to tell your story through financials, how to grow a successful company. She's just absolutely phenomenal. And she's the one leading the module. And I think that that's why there's this feeling of like, I need to get into Pipeline, because where else are you ever going to have someone like Laura who you're going to spend 3 days with? And then as being part of Pipeline, I mean, we have members even now who are like, just who will email her or fly out to Canada to spend time with her to get that insight and that strategy and those connections. She's helped several of our members get to successful exits just because of her connections. So to have that kind of network is so incredibly valuable, and that's part of what Pipeline's bringing to the table.
So you've got 4 modules. They're each focused on different aspects of creating or optimizing the business that you're running, and teaching you how to be an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. It's led by world-class people, is what I've heard you reference and talk about, and I've experienced that. Let's talk about the fellowship itself. Remove the modules, remove the instructors, world-class. Let's talk about the fellowship and the value of, I've seen cohort models, and there's power in cohort models, right? In that peer learning and that peer connection. So tell me a little bit about how that works, how that gets nurtured from a Pipeline perspective, and how you view the importance of that as part of what you guys deliver.
So it's incredibly important to have that cohort. One, again, I'm going to keep going back to it because I think it's incredibly important. Being a serial entrepreneur is incredibly isolating. Being an entrepreneur in general is incredibly isolating. Not having other people who are doing that same thing. You have a lot of people in corporate when you're trying to run a startup idea of like, you're looking at something, it's very difficult to find other people to give you strategic insight in a way that's meaningful. And so to have 13 fellows all come together from, and one of the important things I should say is we're industry agnostic. So you can be in any industry. So we're not just tech. I mean, and I think that there's so much power in the diversity of companies and thought, because you're looking at, you know, someone in ag could be helping someone who's in bio versus, and that you're coming at a problem from a different perspective, and just being able to have someone take a look at your company and say, oh, well, have you thought of solving it this way? And typically you stay in your little circle. If you're in bio, you're talking to other bio people to try to solve something. So to have this ag person come in and say, well, have you thought of it this way, is incredibly powerful. The other piece that we bring to it is that we're regional. So it's Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri. So being able to tap into the network and the connections from other regions and potential sales there and investors is also incredibly powerful. So there's a lot of elements to the cohort that's important. The other thing that I think is, to me, it's incredibly valuable is they go through not just the modules together where they have homework and they're staying up late and working on that, or they should be. But, you know, they have one of the things that we started with the pandemic was mental resilience sessions. So every month as a cohort, they're going through a mental resilience session with a therapist who specializes in working with entrepreneurs to help teach them how to become more mentally resilient. So neuroplasticity, all the things that you can do as an entrepreneur to become more resilient. So in addition to the modules and the homework and all the things that they go through together, there's also this sense of community that we're trying to build, which is you look out for each other because you're stuck with each other. I mean, we're rider, not the horse. We're all about the entrepreneur. So if someone in your cohort's company isn't doing well, you're the ones that are supposed to jump in there and help each other out. And I think that is what has created over the years since 2007, this really unique look out for each other kind of community where it's, and I hate using this word, but it is almost like family in the sense that you probably annoy each other a lot, especially during the year. Am I right? There's a lot, yeah. But after that, you're going to look out for each other and connect each other to investors or try to solve problems. I mean, there's not anything that a member wouldn't do for another member or fellow.
At the end of the day, that's all we got, right, as family. So, on that note, you complete the fellowship, you complete the year, you complete 4 modules. Let's say you make it through all the homework. Let's say you make it through all the social events that go with those modules, because I've seen some people crash and burn in those.
It's a good time.
But you make it out. Now you're a member. So what's membership mean, and what's the value that the membership brings to the overall program?
Man, the value of the membership is just phenomenal. I mean, you're talking about a group that, for example, in 2021, in the heart of the pandemic, we had 5 companies of members exit. That's really hard to do in a given year, but during a pandemic. So if you look at our statistics alongside any VC and our ability to pick the entrepreneurs that are going to be successful, we have an equally good rate. I mean, we know how to pick the entrepreneurs who are going to be successful. And now I might just be doing what Corey did. I forget where I was going with that.
The value of the member. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I was like, oops.
We're going to start referring to that as having Corey moments.
I had a Corey moment. Sorry, Corey.
Yeah.
No, so the value of the membership. So you have people who have had an exit. They've been there. And that's what you need when you're trying to figure out. One, I think one of the most powerful things I've seen is we do these things that are called SWATs, which is it's like a SWAT team coming in to help you. It's like all hands on deck. We bring in the brightest minds across the country, people like Laura, people like Joe Adzima at MIT, to come in and say, okay, and sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's, hey, I have an acquisition offer on my company. What should I be thinking about? So it's not always bad. It's help me think through this. Those are so powerful. I mean, can you imagine having someone like a Laura Kilcrease come in and say, not only here's some things to think about, but I have a connection that might even be able to help you get further. So the power of the membership base is that kind of shared experience, successfully starting companies, but also failing, because there's a lot of power in failure. And when you as a member can help someone who's earlier stage than you are not make the same mistakes, that is incredibly powerful.
I take great joy in any time that a member comes to me as a mentor and asks me a question. There's an easy answer for Pipeline members. It's, well, have you talked to the other members? Exactly. Because granted, guaranteed there is somebody in the membership who has gone through what you're going through, who is experienced or is experiencing something very similar, or who remembers something from their module that maybe you didn't catch in the module, or it was positioned differently based on who was in your cohort, who was in your fellowship.
Yeah.
Go talk to one of your members, because the answer's there, right in front of you. So that's I think that's another one of those great things. So you talked about, well, I think we've established why someone would want to be in the program, and
there's also a lot of perks in the membership. I didn't even get to that.
Well, let's
I was just talking about the community because that's me. Like I care about that. However,
all right, let's talk about the perks.
There's a lot of other perks as well. So professional development. So this last module, we had 2 professional development sessions. We tried to do, because we learned during COVID that we could do a lot of virtual work. So we tried to do a lot of virtual professional development sessions. So again, think of it as like trying to continue to grow. Since 2007, you have almost 200 members. They're in varying stages. So different topics based on different stages of where you are in your company. And then because we have those resources and that many members now, we're able to offer discounts with AWS and HubSpot and all of that. But one of the things that we added that to me was huge was the ability for us to utilize our group status as almost like an association to be able to offer health benefits to our entrepreneurs, because anyone who's ever had their own company knows that as a small company, it is really hard to get health insurance. And so that was something that we added as well. So as a member, you're able to participate in all of that.
Yeah, added value beyond the fellowship and beyond just the membership are these other things that you've been adding on to the members as well. We talked a little bit about how hard it is to get into Pipeline. And so, and I think the other thing that we haven't touched on yet that I want to talk about is how you view diversity of the fellowship and how you historically have looked at diversity in Pipeline and some of the things you're doing. And then I think that'll lead us to the Pathfinder conversation.
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about, like, why is it important to have a diverse cohort of fellows, and has that always been the case with Pipeline, and what have you done, or what has the organization been doing to try to address some of those issues?
So I think that anyone that knows me, if you ask me a question, I'll give you an honest answer. I think if you look at the organization historically and you think about in 2007 and you're talking about high growth serial entrepreneurs, the people who were starting high growth companies were typically white males. And when you look at the organization, when I started, historically is typically white males. And that's a problem. That is, one, there is no diversity of thought, there's no diversity of culture, there's no diversity. And so when I started, one of the things that we knew we needed to change was looking at why is that the case? And I think when you're coming into an organization and you're brand new, you can ask questions that maybe you couldn't otherwise. So it was, what was the community feeling around who Pipeline was? And on its best day, it was a white country club, if we're being completely honest. And that, for me personally, was something that from day one, I knew that needed to change and we could change, because we were missing out on incredible talent. Because when you looked at Pipeline on our website, if you were not a white male, you did not see yourself on our website.
Right.
And so that took owning it and saying there was a problem and then doing something to change it. And for us, there were a lot of relationships in the community that did not exist. There are such amazing organizations in Kansas City, Dan Smith, Porterhouse, Kira Cherie with Entrepreneurial Business Basics, who are doing such amazing work to help build the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and there was no relationship there. So there wasn't a way to say, who are the entrepreneurs that are going through your programs, and then how do we help continue to build them? So there's this very big gap. And so we worked with them to identify where that gap was. So where did their programs end and where did Pipeline begin? And there was a massive gap, in not just in Kansas City, but regionally, for resources for scaling companies for underrepresented entrepreneurs. It was like, if you had a brick and mortar company, there were resources. But if you're trying to scale a company, especially a technology company, it was just a drop off. And then you have Pipeline all the way up here, but there was an uneven playing field to get into Pipeline. And so we built out a program that we're piloting this year called Pathfinder. And it's to fill that gap, to allow us to create programming that is specifically for underrepresented entrepreneurs who are not yet working on their companies full time, but are serial entrepreneurs looking to scale their company. And our goal is to help them get there and have that be a path that then they continue on in Pipeline. And my very, very first startup was in healthcare. So I love the idea of a continuum of care. So for me, Pipeline becomes this continuum of care where you begin with Pathfinder, you now have an 18-month program of resources that when you finish, you hopefully then move on to Pipeline. So now we're looking at, 2.5 years worth of support, resources, programming, and then a membership, which is for life. So that was the idea and the thought and the heart around it. And I think it was a little bit easier, a little bit harder because of the pandemic. The pandemic allowed us to do a lot of community-facing resources, which is not something that Pipeline did in the past. Just because it was, again, it's this community, but it was a very closed-off community. And so we were able to start doing more resources that were community-focused, allowing people to see that, we were shifting and evolving as an organization, and recognize that there was a need, that Pipeline's this brain trust that was keeping it all internally instead of focusing that outward. And so that's what we've tried to do over the last 3 years. And there's so much work still to do, but we're shifting and we're evolving.
Oh, there'll always be work to do, Melissa. So don't worry. The plenty of work in your future and in all of our futures as we try to build ecosystems. I want to go back to, I want to ask you something about Pathfinder, because I've heard people have come back and said they view Pathfinder as the fellowship for underrepresented entrepreneurs. And I think it's important to understand it's almost like a pre-fellowship. It's right. a preparatory opportunity. It's not, I get very critical of large VCs who have decided they're going to parse off parts of their funds and say, here's the money for entrepreneurs of color.
Right.
And everybody applauds that. And it's, well, but why haven't you changed how you manage the large mountain of money that you're sitting on? Not all VCs are like that. And I think it's important that we do both. But I want to make sure we draw a distinction here, because Pathfinder is not that answer for the fellowship.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that was super important to us from the beginning was that Pathfinder was about earlier stage entrepreneurs who have not had an even playing field. So for us, it was, we wanted it to be your earlier stage. So you are not yet working on your company full time.
So you're not full time.
So you're not
so that's
full-time.
One major distinction.
Right. And then you are female, BIPOC, or rural.
Okay.
And so when you look at underrepresented entrepreneurs, they've not had equal access to resources, to programming. And so as a result of that, we wanted to specifically offer resources that were the same quality, but for people who have different issues as they're trying to grow their companies, because they aren't working full time. They're working full time on another job and trying to run their startup. So we wanted to make sure that we created a program that was just of the same quality, just earlier stage entrepreneurs, because that was our focus. And there was a gap in the ecosystem where no one was, again, everyone's looking at brick and mortar. No one's looking at these serial entrepreneurs who are high growth. And we just needed to apply resources to an earlier stage startup.
So we've got 45 minutes, so I want to draw I want to do a couple of things here. So we've talked about why someone would want to be in the fellowship. We've talked about the membership benefits when they get on the other side. We've talked about the creation of Pathfinder, which is this preparatory opportunity for earlier stage, part-time, get you ready to maybe apply for the fellowship. So that's, I think, on the like the demand side. Like you're explaining to someone why they would want to be a part and what the two programs are like. When you're evaluating applicants, let's talk about who you want to see in the process. You've said something a couple times that I think I've heard as I don't want to say confusion point, but I think there's some clarity that could be brought to it, which is industry agnostic, regional, but the high growth.
The scaling part.
Right? So help me and help everyone understand when you say that it's about high growth entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of people are like, well, there's lifestyle businesses in there. Well, lifestyle businesses can be very scalable. What
you just answered the question.
I know, but I want to hear you answer it too. What do you look for? How does Pipeline, how do the evaluators, how do the people looking at these applications, how do you define high growth?
So that's a great question. Yes, a lifestyle business can absolutely be high growth. I think the thing to put in is that it has to be two parts. The serial entrepreneur, because you can have a high growth company and not be a serial entrepreneur. So I'm
so passionate about this thing. If it doesn't work out, I'm going to go.
Right.
Well, yeah. All right.
But so for us, so let me give you an example. So if I am, let's just say I have a brick and mortar company and I'm doing really well. And I'm like, I'm happy with this, but I want to scale it. I want to grow. I want to make more money. That's not our person. If you're like, I have a brick and mortar company and I would like to figure out a way to make there be 20 brick and mortar companies because there's this unique idea I have that has not been done before of how I can scale this. That's us. We are the second one where it's like, okay, I don't want to just do one thing. I want to figure out how to actually either solve a problem that hasn't been solved in a way that's, growing and scaling rapidly because we're trying to help them get there faster.
So doesn't have to be tech.
Does not have to be tech.
Needs to be scalable.
Needs to be scalable.
Beyond just growing revenue in that instance, it's about the scalability of the people you employ, the idea, the problem that you're solving, those types of things. So if my answer in the app, just to make sure I'm clear on this, and I'm going to inject a little bit of my humor in this. So if my answer is that I want to go build an island or I want to go buy an island, if I exit, if my answer is I want to go build islands for all the other entrepreneurs, then that would qualify as a good answer.
And make money doing it.
And make money doing it. All right, fair enough. Okay, I got it. What else are you looking for? So for someone who's going to apply, let's stick with the fellowship for a second.
Yep.
What are you looking for? What advice would you give to people who are applying to be Pipeline Fellows for 2023? What advice would you give them in that application process?
I mean, I think a big part of it is we have a culture code that is, again, if you're looking at serial entrepreneurs, one of the biggest things, especially because this is what has driven the members that give back and help other companies scale, you have to have this give back mentality of they're investing in me right now in this fellowship year, but once I'm done, I'm going to invest in the people coming through. And we were literally in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we had this happy hour of networking with members who were driving crazy hours just to be there for that and to give back in that way where they're showing up and, they would help with anything. Like so what you want is you want people who are going to take that and have that same mentality. So when they go through the fellowship year, they're committed to giving back to the community. And what you also want is people, when they do have successful exits, which we see all the time in Pipeline, they're investing in the Pipeline members. So it's this idea of, not just success, but what does success mean to you? And we want people whose success means I want to invest in other people, whether that's in my time, whether that's financially, whether that's my resources. It's a huge element of what we're looking for.
How does that come through in the application? So like if you're talking through to someone about applying for the how would you expect that to come through in the application process?
So there's a lot about mentorship. So one of the questions that we ask is about mentorship. Have you had a mentor? What's that been like? And I love it when people talk about their mentor in a way that they're also then saying, I want to be able to do that to someone. I want to grow my company. So mentorship is a huge, it's when I'm like trying not to give away all the secret questions and why we ask them.
Just trying to give a little bit of advice
But
here.
mentorship's a big thing. I mean, one, it shows your ability to take feedback. So when you go into a module, you are getting your company broken down right in front of you and the other fellows. That's hard. If you can't take feedback, critical feedback that's designed to help you, you will not be successful in Pipeline, because it is a whole lot of really brilliant people trying to help you get better, but it does not feel pleasant in the moment. And so for us, it is finding people who can take feedback and can take critique and be truly mentored. So it is a critical piece of the Pipeline process that you're able to be mentored and also want to be a mentor. It just shows that give back that we're looking for.
Melissa, I talk to entrepreneurs a lot who say things like, I don't want to talk to anybody about my idea because I don't want them to steal my idea. And my feedback is always, your idea is worth nothing. It's the execution of your idea that has value.
I say $20.
Inflation, it's not worth anything right now. Like, it's the execution of your idea. So I think giving away the answers, when you go through the interview process, entrepreneurs can see through your bullshit pretty quickly. So if you wrote it down one way because you heard how you should write it down, when you get in the interview process and somebody presses you a little bit, I think they can see through, is the answer, are you authentic in that answer? Does that mean something to you? So I appreciate not wanting to give away the secrets, but I also think there's some value in, I think, being more transparent about Pipeline, because there's still this shroud of secrecy that some people who want to be Pipeline member, they still want to understand what it is. That's one of the reasons we want to have you here. They want to understand what it is. They want to understand, why should I be interested? Like, I'm running a company. I have to make evaluations of where I want to apply. You know, do I go in this accelerator? Do I go get this grant money?
Right.
You know, which one of these things? Why would I do Pipeline?
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we're clear about that for folks.
Well, so a few things. I have to give a huge shout out right now to Abram and Joshua, because this problem that you just mentioned around the confusion around who Pipeline is because historically we've so focused head down on the programming, we've never told the story of who we are. And thanks to Joshua going through our program this year, he was like, I had no idea what this was, and wanted to help us figure out how to better tell that story, because there is a lot of confusion. Like, okay, I don't have to give up equity, but I'm giving up a lot of time, and what am I going to get out of it if I'm not getting equity? Am I going to get funding? Am I not going to get funding? Am I going to get, like, what does that look like? And, you know, so in addition to just the confusion of what's a fellowship, when you answer the question of what is Pipeline? It's a fellowship. Everyone wants me to say it's an accelerator, it's an incubator, it's a fellowship. Okay, well, what is a fellowship?
Are we gonna go find the rings?
Like, what are we doing here? Good timing on that one.
Yeah, thanks.
And so that is something that I think any organization has to think through, but in particular one that's confusing to most people. And, you know, so without that, we wouldn't. So we are starting to better tell our story to say, here's what the fellowship is, here's what this programming is, here's what it can offer you. And so that's kind of where we're trying to adjust. But when people say, why Pipeline? I mean, I've shared all the reasons, but I think the other thing that it used to be was you should only apply to Pipeline. No, you're an entrepreneur. You should apply to everything and try to get into as much as you can that you can find value in, because it's really hard as an entrepreneur. Our programming is amazing, but we're not in competition with the other programs that are out there. So you should apply for Pipeline. You should also apply for the other programs that are out there, because it's really important to get that mentorship and that support. And what we offer is unique, but there's other programs that offer a lot of support. And so you should absolutely apply for more than one thing.
I applaud you for creating a culture that is not only about that exclusivity, because I think that is another thing that I've seen that has changed. So I applaud you for that, because I think Pipeline being the only thing has been, you know, kind of the mindset for a while. So I think that's extremely valuable. One of the reasons we do the things we do is to try to help people understand the value of being in an ecosystem. I'm heads down. I don't have time for the ecosystem stuff, but the answers sometimes you're looking for are in the ecosystem. They're far easier to get access to when you're engaged than when you're only heads down. So I thank you for that mentality, that kind of perspective that you've brought to the organization. I think that's extremely healthy.
It helps it as a serial entrepreneur.
Which is why I wanted to start there, because you want to understand the You understand the value. It's lived experience.
And I think it makes you jump in a different perspective when you're in it. And also, I was a female founder. I did have to raise capital. I know and have lived experiences of how that was incredibly difficult and shouldn't have been. And so for me, it has been kind of one of those things where you jump in and you're just like, okay, what would I need? And for me, it's not just, I love Pipeline. You should definitely apply to Pipeline. It's not for everyone. You have to be a serial entrepreneur. You have to have a scaling company. You have to be at a certain point in revenue to get there. But
what is that point, by the way?
Okay, so this is the other thing that I think makes it confusing. It used to be, so when I first started 3 years ago, it was you should be 500,000 to $1 million in revenue and scaling. But let's be honest, the pandemic has not been easy for most people. So what we started to do was we looked for, are there some companies that when they're coming to us are at that level? Yes. There are also some companies that are not. And so again, it's ride or not the horse. If we were only focused on the company, that would be tried and true. But that's not where we are. We're looking for that dynamic individual who has an idea that can scale, but is also someone that if that company failed, you'd be like, I'm betting on that person.
Yeah, sorry. Were you?
No.
So a lot of times in programs, and I believe in this firmly. And if I evaluate people to come into an accelerator, venture studio, those types of things, I look for co-founders. Mm-hmm. How do you guys see that? Because you don't take two people into the program. It's the focus on the serial entrepreneur. So how do you view that solo founder, solopreneur versus co-founded company? Like, how does Pipeline view that?
So you can absolutely have a co-founder and get into Pipeline. And I think that is something, thank you for pointing out all the things that have been very confusing. So you can actually have a co-founder.
We're here.
Thank you. You can absolutely have a co-founder. One person is going through the program. So when we had people applying last year and there were co-founders, sometimes both of them would show up and we're like, you're both showing up to the interview, but only one of you is actually going to go through. So you have to decide who that is.
So rock, paper, scissors.
I know.
Right now,
however you're going to figure that out. And so that is something that only one person goes through it. Now, I will tell you over the last 3 years, we've worked very hard to change where before it was, if you weren't the founder, you didn't show up to any events. You couldn't show up to events. You weren't going through the modules. And what we're trying to do is allow when we're doing, especially like professional development, allowing co-founders to come in, because again, as an entrepreneur, when you have a co-founder, it's super important that that person understands why you're making this such a priority, and the lessons that are being learned in the modules and everything else are so incredibly valuable. So it's one of the areas that I think that we will continue to evolve over time. It will always be about the founder, but allowing more opportunities for co-founders to be involved, because again, you're trying to help scale a company. That knowledge being shared with both parties is valuable. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know we don't have all night to talk about this. I think we could talk about a lot more things. There's one more. So Pathfinder, what are you looking for from? There's two more things I want to cover, I guess. Pathfinder applicants. Yep. What are you looking for in Pathfinder applicants? Okay, so Pathfinder. So when you think about the funnel for Pipeline, it is one, you can apply for both programs. So if you're not sure, there's a button that says both. Select both. If you don't select both, then we can't look.
Did you have people that did that last year, and did they end up going the other, like?
Yes, and I
think that's important for people to understand, that people ended up in the program that they might not have thought they would be in.
Right.
That happens.
And that's super important to us, because we create, doing the level of interviews and the process to actually get into Pipeline. It's 3 interviews to get into the Pipeline Fellowship. It's 2 to get into Pathfinder, and after an application and all these other pieces. So the mechanics and of like making it so if someone goes through Pathfinder and we find out that they really make more sense for the fellowship, we can move them. It is it's scheduling gymnastics to make that happen. So yes, definitely apply for both. But if you're working on your company full time, then you automatically go towards the fellowship. If you don't get in, you're too early, that that's all, and that's all you applied for, then you're just too early and you'll have to come back after you've grown the company. If you apply for both, it gives us the opportunity to then say, okay, well, maybe you are early enough that you should be in Pathfinder, so we can again create that continuum of care where then you can move on through Pathfinder, then move to the fellowship, then become a member, successfully exit, give back.
So Pathfinder pre-rev?
Yes. So have to have a company.
Okay, you've got to have a company.
You
don't have to be full-time.
You cannot be full-time working on your startup. That is the one thing that will move you from one to the other. If you're working full-time on your company, it's the fellowship and you might just be too early. If you are not working on your company full-time, then Pathfinder.
Okay.
And so we had people who had revenue in Pathfinder, but just weren't working on their companies full-time. Okay. That's the main kind of funnel decision tree.
Okay.
And from an, and also like for us, it was, you go down that funnel and then you have to be a serial entrepreneur. So I cannot overestimate the serial entrepreneur part, because even with Pathfinder,
we'll go back and count the number of times that's been said in the video. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're so early stage, you're not working on your company full time, the likelihood that that's going to be successful is honestly very low. But again, we're investing in the founder, not their company. So we want them to be someone that we're like, if this doesn't work out, what are you going to do? And it's like, oh, I have 5 other ideas of things that I want to do and that are scalable. So
I'm guessing that mentorship question might be even more important in the Pathfinder
mentorship
funnel.
So there's a number of things. So we've done a partnership with UMKC, which is about to get announced.
You heard it here first.
Yes. And each of our Pathfinders was paired with an intern with UMKC, and they help them between module 2, which is about your business model, and module 3, which is about your financials, go through a business model canvas and build that out, which is a really good thing to go through as you're building a company. And it was made so much easier through that partnership with UMKC. We've expanded that into our membership now and are working with their MBA students on a pilot program to have interns for some of our members on a specific project. So we just kicked that off this week as well. So for both Pathfinder and then our members, what we're trying to do is find these additional resources, because when you aren't working on your company full time, what you don't have is a whole team to help you. And so we wanted to create opportunities to have both mentors who are helping you as the founder figure out how to grow and scale your company, but also interns who were being led by someone other than yourself. So you have UMKC leading that to make it a little bit lighter of a lift for the founder, and a specific task. So those are the kind of things that for Pathfinder we want to keep building out. In addition to, it's a free program, and we also have provided access to a company called Logica, which is a free resource on financials, just a lot of free resources to, again, try to help someone who's working full-time still find ways to scale their company.
That's amazing. No, that's great. I think it's very helpful for people to hear that as they're going through this application process. Applications close?
Not till the middle of November. So what we learned last year was it was a lot for a small team to go through all of those applications. And so we gave ourselves a little bit more time to be able to process those as they come in.
That only works when people don't wait till the last minute.
Well, look, we already know that that's always going to happen, but we gave ourselves to the middle of November. And then again, it's a very long process. So you go through the application process, then we go through the interview process. And then in January, they will kick off. And then for our current fellows, they will actually do a daytime pitch competition at our first module, which is in February. And then in April, we will have our Innovators Gala to celebrate the class of 2022.
Whoop, whoop.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, see, here we go again. Every class is the best
always
class. I love this competition. It's great. 2009 can still pretty much, I think, stand above everybody, but that's... They keep writing me checks, Joshua. I don't know if I haven't seen one come from you yet, but as soon as you start writing me checks, I'll start promoting 2022. All right. Last question really for you is, where do you see Pipeline in 5 years? So I think you've got the foundation of some amazing things that you're continuing. You've made some fundamental changes in how the program is perceived and how you're doing the programming in the business. You've created this Pathfinder. What's next, and what do you see in 5 years? What do you want to see from Pipeline in 5 years?
So where we are right now is really trying to build out a world-class program of Pathfinder. So the fellowship has been established and successfully creating amazing entrepreneurs since 2007. We will continue to evolve that because, I mean, when you think about, you know, just look at the market right now, you know, and venture capital, given everything. I mean, like, everything's always evolving and shifting. And so we want to make sure that the modules that we're taking our fellows through are new and updated and reflective of, you know, the ongoing changes in the economy and just in building a startup. There's just new tools and resources. So that will always be there. But with Pathfinder, we want to make sure that that is the same world class. We want people like Laura Gilcrease, you know, who we were talking about in the beginning, teaching those programs and helping us really build that out. And it's a pilot year, so that's going to take time and effort. And we have some amazing people internationally that are coming in to help us build that out. So over 5 years, that's obviously going to evolve and shift. And I think that Pipeline, the fellowship, will shift as well. So I have a feeling that it will shift back towards the fellowship being later stage companies and Pathfinder maybe being earlier stage. But the biggest thing is really building that Pathfinder and then the community. So one of the things that we just finished up doing was a 6-week series on funding your startup, which you were a part of. Thank you very much. So it's super important to Pipeline that we create a resource, a place where people can come and say, okay, we recorded all of them. So having our website be a place where, you know, there's education tools, which right now it's not. Again, it's always been this Pipeline, what is it? No one knows. And it was meant to be that way. And so for us, we really want to create an entire program where you could actually just go to the website and learn the basics of, what do I need to know about financials? What do I need to know about these things? So when you get to Pathfinder, or you're coming into the fellowship, you have a place to go to actually, you know, learn the basics, and, you know, offering that for free and just having that be something that's accessible to, you know, regionally, but anyone can access our website. And so we're really trying to build out that content. Again, huge shout out to Joshua and Abram for helping us do that. But it's super important for us to be able to be a resource, not just regionally, but nationally for entrepreneurs. And so we're working to really build out that community focus.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate that. Thanks for what you're doing with Pipeline and for, you know, growing and continuing kind of the legacy that it's established for not just Kansas City, but for the Midwest. I think there's a lot of us who recognize Pipeline as being, you know, kind of the big engine around entrepreneurship in the Midwest. And so I appreciate the effort that you and Katie and the team have put into this. Shout out to Katie Anderson.
Yeah, Katie.
And so thank you again. Would love to have you back and love to talk.
I mean, Corey's coming back. I feel like, thank you for inviting me. I would feel bad if you didn't invite me, like I had done a subpar job. So thank you.
Yeah. So that sounds like a promise. Like, yes. She's coming back. All right.
Yes.
Fantastic. So we'd love to have you come back and talk about some of the other things that you've been up to, some of the other things that are happening with Pipeline that aren't related to why people should apply, what that looks like, and those types of things. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Well, and thank you, because you have been, I'm going to do the little Corey plug here like you did, but I mean, you've been a mentor advisor since, as we were talking about, when I first got here. Kevin was involved with Pipeline. He has more historical knowledge than I do because he was involved with the organization long before I started 3 years ago. So thank you for continuing to give your time. Thank you for what you're doing with Keystone and just being such a huge part of building out the ecosystem and making it, you know, what it is today. So
appreciate that. Thank you.